Hello everyone, so this is the tissue lecture. More than likely this is going to take two. I'm hoping that I can fit in one. I don't think that's going to happen. So we have talked about chemistry before, about bioorganic molecules, and then we talk about cells. And in this case, the collection of cells that actually has, in this case, a common function is actually called tissues. Okay, and there are four main tissue types in the human body. It's color-coded as so: epithelial tissue in green, muscular tissue in pink, I'm assuming, or purple, connective tissue in blue, and nervous tissue in whatever that thing is, brown. Okay. Uh, FYI, folks, the tissue types, even though we classify them based on function and location, all of their functions are actually interrelated. Okay, so you cannot have epithelial tissue just doing absorption and secretion. It also needs the connective tissue and muscular tissue to actually do such functions. Okay, this is a typical tissue organization. So this is the lumen. This is in this case, if you want to think about it, this is where food, all right, is actually churning right now, and this is outside the actual stomach. So you're looking right now, this layer here is actually what you're seeing. This layer is actually the innermost layer where the food is actually being churned around the stomach. By the way, if you think about a sandwich, the two ends, like the two surfaces of the sandwich, the inside layer and the outermost layer is always going to be epithelium, right? Epithelium. Here we go. Epithelium. Right? In between those two epithelial layers are gonna be muscle. Okay, and here you can see the muscle layers. Here there are three muscle layers in the stomach, and then embedded all throughout all of this innermost layers are actually, in this case, you're gonna have nervous tissue and connective tissue. The wispy cobweb looking thing is connective tissue, and so is all of the spaces in between muscle is actually made up of connective tissue. All right, so again, this is typical organization. So anything, any part, if we cut a human open, the outermost layer is going to be epithelium. Once you hit an opening, another opening, that's another epithelial layer. Okay, so this is a typical organization. So nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is the easily distinguishable thing. The purpose of nervous tissue in this case, if you look at it, is to send impulses. Okay, this is the communication, the fast communication pathway for the human body. Fast because there are other things that actually communicate in your human body, and they are typified by this long extensions called axons. So in a slide or a tissue section, you can actually see this long extensions called axons. Okay, and again, structure belies function. Why do they have long extensions called axons? Well, that is how they send messages, like telegraph poles in the olden days, to other portions of the human body or to each other. Okay, the location is brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And then we have muscle tissue. Muscle tissue specializes in movement. You actually have three types. Skeletal muscle tissue is voluntary. It is in regular skeletal muscle like your biceps, your triceps, your rectus abdominis. Okay, so you probably heard about that. Your vastus lateralis. All right, your deltoids. Okay, that's voluntary. And then you have cardiac muscle tissue, which is in the heart only. And then you have smooth muscle tissue, which is in organs. Okay, aside from obviously the heart. A very distinguishable thing between skeletal muscle tissue and cardiac muscle tissue is they have striations. If you can see that there's actually lines perpendicular, okay, to the long, in this case, fibers, into the long myofiber, like in this case, muscle cell. Okay, those striations, actually what they do is they actually either, the distances between each other is either long or short, and when it's short, that means the muscle has contracted. When it's long, that means the muscle has relaxed. Okay, a distinguishable factor between skeletal muscle tissue and cardiac muscle tissue, folks, is the presence of this big block desmosomes or gap junctions called intercalated discs, and that's highly distinctive for cardiac muscle tissue. Now, smooth muscle tissue, folks, again, is in organs, and if you can see here, you can see that they look like spindle shape. Spindle shape means to say it's actually, oops, go back. Spindle shape, it actually looks like this. Okay, so that's actually the shape of smooth muscle. What's going to happen, folks, is I'm going to give you a tissue section and you're going to think it's connective tissue. Okay. Again, the difference is if you look at the nuclei in smooth muscle tissue is very, very close to each other. The nucleus, if you look at it, folks, is actually this black blobs. And as you can see, the distances between nuclei is actually very, very close to each other. Movement, striations, nuclei close to each other. Okay. And now we're going to talk about the most complicated type of tissue, the most diverse type of tissue in the human body, and that's called connective tissue. The big distinction between connective tissue versus epithelial, nervous, okay, or muscle tissue is there is a presence of a lot of extracellular things. Extracellular meaning to say objects, or in this case substances, that is outside the actual cell. And that extracellular matrix, as you shown here, is two things. Ground substance, which is in this case inanimate objects. So it's just in this case like blood is a ground substance. So chondroitin sulfate is a ground substance. Okay. Calcified bone, mineralized bone, calcium phosphate is a ground substance. And then you actually have protein fibers. And protein fibers, folks, there are two types. And I know for a fact you were looking like Abner, there's three, there's actually only two types. You have reticular fibers, and FYI, reticular fibers, folks, is just a different type of collagen fibers. So you actually have two types of collagen fibers, collagen reticular, and elastic fibers. And dependent upon the function of the connective tissue, you could have more elastic fibers than collagen fibers, or you can have more collagen fibers than elastic fibers. Okay, and then we have resting cells. In this case, resting cells are cells that are present in that, in this case, connective tissue. In the terms of like, so in this case, you have macrophages, which are phagocytes. They actually eat debris and they eat bacteria. Adipocyte, that they store fats, and fibroblasts, they make fibers, right? Which means collagen fibers. And again, please remember that reticular fibers are also type of a collagen fiber and elastic fibers. So again, and the big thing about connective tissue is the spaces between nuclei is so vast. Okay, so if you look right now, here's a nuclei, here's a nuclei. You can see there's a lot of spaces between them. So that is why it's so distinctive between skeletal muscle tissue that we saw before, or I'm sorry, the smooth muscle tissue in which the nuclei are very, very close together. All right. So, or even in nervous tissue, in which you can see that there were actually multiple nuclei next to each other. Now, we have dense connective tissue, we have loose connective tissue, okay? We have cartilage, okay? We have bone, we have all of these things. So, what is dense connective tissue? Dense connective tissue, folks, is primarily made of collagen fibers, okay? For this too. And then the elastic connective tissue, the term itself, elastic, means to say it's made up of elastic fibers. Okay, so dominant elastic fibers, dominant collagen. In dense regular connective tissue, the reason it's called regular is because the collagen fibers are parallel to each other. In dense irregular connective tissue, there is no rhyme or reason behind the order of collagen fibers. Okay, this is present when there's only stress in a specific axis. So it's a one-directional movement, right? Push, pull, okay? No twisting motions. So collagen fiber, this type of connective tissue is actually more present in ligaments, okay? It's a one-way thing, you know, like, right? So I hope anterior cruciate ligament, okay? Posterior cruciate ligament, right? So dense irregular connective tissue is when you actually have movement in multiple axes, okay, on its underlying thing. And the skin, if you think about it, you can pinch skin and you can twist it around, right? So purple nurple, right? So how does your skin in this case withstand such stress? Well, because the collagen fibers in this case is in multiple arrays, so therefore it can withstand multiple stressors, okay? elastic connective tissue, the reason why you need a more elastic is because this is actually the primary connective tissue in the walls of your big arteries. It's because you have a lot of pressure in those actual organs, right? So what happens is it has to be able to snap back to its original shape. And that is actually what the elastin, the protein that actually makes up elastic connective tissue, actually does, is it creates elasticity so that when there's an expansion of the aorta, or in this case, like in this case, your common iliac artery, it snaps back to its original structure because of these elastic fibers. All right, please make sure that you understand how they look like under the microscope, and this is going to be typical images for your tissue quiz. Okay. Then we have cartilage, and cartilage, again, folks, is primarily, it could be made up of collagen fibers, elastic fibers. A distinctive structure of cartilage, folks, is the eye-like structures. If you look at it, it looks like an eye. I don't know what you else can see, but I see eyes all over the place. Eye. And again, we talked about this before. Connective tissue, there is lots of distances between nuclei. Look at the distance between these two nuclei. I know those two are next to each other, but look, right? Distances. Let's go back to that one. You cannot even see the distance between nuclei. Before in smooth muscle, the nuclei is all over the place. All right. So again, connective cartilage, they look like eyes. If you see a tissue section and there are eyes looking at you, more than likely it's going to be a cartilage connective tissue. All right. Collagen, high in elastic fibers. All right. And then we have bone. Bone is a type of connective tissue, and the reason why that is this white stuff in this diagram, folks, is calcium phosphate. So that's outside the cell. So the extracellular matrix in this case is solid and rigid. And you can see that there are concentric structures, okay, called osteons, and that is typical of bone tissue. If you can see it, there's actually like black dots here. Not this big black dot. That big black dot is actually where arteries actually perforate the actual bone. Those black dots, folks, are nucleus of cells called osteocytes. Okay, and again, you guys can read about the function in here as well. The last type of connective tissue, folks, is blood. Blood is a fluid connective tissue, and again, as you guys can see, these are red blood cells. The actual extracellular matrix is predominantly liquid. Okay, plasma is liquid. And again, you can see this is two types of cells, and you can see the distance between cells are quite far apart. Now you might say these are cells, Abner. Well, there's no nuclei in red blood cells. Okay, so this is also a type of connective tissue. So if you see structures such as big blue nuclei, that is actually blood. And then if you see all of this, it looks like donuts. Those donuts, folks, are actually erythrocytes or red blood cells. And again, the function of that is to transport and to protect and all of these things. As a general rule, in this case, connective tissue actually has a very diverse array of function, but predominantly they are in two things: structural and protective. Okay, in muscle, the function of muscle is obviously for movement, and the purpose of nervous tissue in this case, folks, is to relay messages, to basically detect stimulus and relay impulses throughout the body. All right, there's going to be a follow-up video about epithelial tissue that follows, that you should be watching for coming up next.